Have you ever thought that a granola bar and a cup of black coffee, no sugar, could spark a story that turns an entire world upside down? Meet Olivia Marie Smith, the petite assistant with a heart bigger than the sky, and Jordan Wesley Brooks, the icy CEO who thought he had it all until she walked in, armed with numbers, smiles, and a kiss that shook the whole office. From stolen glances in the hallways to the whispers of scandal, this isn't just a tale of love. It's the journey of two souls daring to cross boundaries, face storms, and find each other amid life's chaos. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you might even wonder, is love truly worth risking everything? Don't look away, because this story is only just beginning. Beneath the fading sunset of a long, exhausting day, Olivia Marie Smith, a delicate flower in the vast garden of Four Barrel, stepped through the office door after 3 months of relentless work. Her job was no child's play. Towering stacks of paperwork, numbers dancing as if to taunt her, and emails demanding absolute focus. Yet Olivia, with her warm heart and tireless hands, maintained a simple yet profound habit, as natural as breathing. A sacred ritual she had carved out for herself amidst the rush of life. Each evening as the streetlights began to flicker, she walked briskly to Borner Market, a small cherished corner in the cold expanse of the city. There she picked out fragrant loaves of bread, cool bottles of fruit juice like morning dew, and a few crisp granola bars, small gifts brimming with a sky full of love. With a bag in hand, she crossed the bustling street, her petite but steady feet carrying her to the sidewalk in front of the company headquarters. There a group of homeless people awaited, like lost birds seeking a flicker of warmth amid the chill winds of everyday life. Some sat huddled on threadbare blankets, their weary eyes still sparking with hope at the sight of Olivia's familiar figure. "Olivia, it's good to see you," came a raspy voice from old Gavin, his gray beard like a winter cloud, though his smile glowed warm as a fire on a dark night. She knelt beside him, her eyes twinkling with simple joy, and began sharing her heartfelt gifts. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight we've got fresh fruit juice and tasty granola bars, enough to soothe a hungry stomach and warm the soul." Soft laughter rippled through the air, a gentle melody in the quiet space, as weathered faces lit up with life. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sensation she knew well. Even with empty hands and little in her pockets, she could still plant seeds of hope in these fragile lives. Unbeknownst to her, from the top floor of the building, behind a pane of cold, clear glass, a pair of sharp eyes followed her every move. Jordan Wesley Brooks, the CEO of Four Barrel, a man whose coldness and rationality seemed etched into the lines on his forehead, stood there, arms crossed, watching. He wasn't the type to be moved by trivial things, nor did he ever concern himself with the personal lives of his subordinates. To him, the world revolved around numbers, contracts, and strategies sharp as a blade. But in recent days, he'd begun to notice this young woman, the one who left the office each evening and headed straight to the homeless group outside, without hesitation. At first, he thought it a mere coincidence, a fleeting moment like a breeze through an open window. But day after day he realized it wasn't impulse, it was a steady rhythm, a silent commitment. From his luxurious walnut desk, Jordan squinted down, catching Olivia's radiant smile as she chatted with Gavin and the others. "What does she get out of this?" he muttered, his voice deep as a well, shaking his head in confusion. He turned back to the window, returning to the pile of documents awaiting him, but a corner of his mind, though he wouldn't admit it, remained captivated by this strange employee, a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. The next day Olivia dove back into the grind. Thick financial reports, a barrage of emails from her stern department head. A man so strict he could silence a boardroom with a single glance. The work was far from easy, but Olivia never let a sigh escape her lips. She knew she needed it, the way a tree needs water to survive. That afternoon, as she hunched over a towering stack of files, a shadow suddenly fell across her desk. Looking up, she startled to see Jordan Wesley Brooks standing there, his piercing eyes boring into her as if to see through her soul. Her heart pounded like a trapped bird. "Mr. Jordan," she stammered, trying to steady her voice. "Olivia, right?" he asked, his tone low and even like waves against a rocky shore. She nodded, so surprised she nearly dropped her pen. She'd never imagined a man like him, the king on Four Barrel's throne, would know her small name. "How long have you been working here?" he continued, arms crossed, his gaze weighing something unseen. "A few months, sir," she replied, her voice soft but firm. He nodded slowly, as if solving a complex equation in his head. "Do you like this job?" A simple question, but from his lips, it carried the weight of a hidden challenge. Olivia blinked, pausing to think before answering. "I do, sir. It's challenging and I've learned so much." He studied her a moment longer, his eyes probing, then gave a slight nod. "Good. Keep it up." With that he turned and left, leaving Olivia sitting there, a swirl of emotions churning within, wondering what had just happened. At day's end, as always, she visited Borner Market, bags of snacks in hand, crossing the familiar street to meet her homeless friends. She knelt, handing out each small gift, her smile like a full moon lighting the dark. From the main entrance, Jordan unexpectedly paused, his eyes catching the scene. He stood still near his sleek car, watching in silence. There was something about this girl, her uncalculated sincerity, her quiet joy in giving, that left him both unsettled and intrigued. He, a man who believed every action in life demanded a return, now stood gazing at Olivia, his mind stirred by unanswered questions. As he drove home, for the first time in years, Jordan Wesley Brooks' thoughts weren't consumed solely by numbers and strategies. Olivia, the small girl with the vast heart, slipped into his mind, a warm ray piercing through his thick layer of ice. In the days that followed, she kept at her work. Complex spreadsheets, endless emails, and tasks requiring meticulous care. She worked quietly, efficiently, sometimes fumbling when nervous, but never seeking attention. Only at day's end, when she left the office to tend to the homeless, did she truly shine. Not with dazzling brilliance, but with a gentle, enduring light like an oil lamp burning through the night. From his lofty window, Jordan began to realize this wasn't mere passing curiosity. He started waiting, though he wouldn't admit it to himself, to see her each evening. "She's strange," he muttered, but this time, his voice lacked its usual dryness. There was a softness, as if the stone in his heart was being worn down by the steady stream of her kindness. And he knew one day he'd have to do something to shift this story. Not just for Olivia, but perhaps for himself as well. Under the dim glow of her computer screen, Olivia Marie Smith was hunched over, finishing the day's financial report, her fingers gliding across the keyboard like a dancer performing for no audience. Suddenly, a small ping broke through her train of thought. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. "Emergency meeting with Jordan Wesley Brooks and the finance department. 4:30 p.m., 34th floor. Olivia swallowed hard, her throat dry as if she'd just run through a desert. It wasn't that she feared the cold CEO, or rather not entirely, but his presence carried a strange weight, as if each of his steps thickened the air in the room. She quickly grabbed her worn notebook, took a deep breath as if preparing to enter a tiger's den, and hurried to the elevator. When the meeting room doors on the 34th floor slid open, Olivia immediately felt the eyes of her colleagues, curious glances mixed with scrutiny, as if she were a strange bird lost among a flock of crows. But what made her heart pound wasn't them. It was the razor-sharp gaze of Jordan Wesley Brooks. He sat at the head of the table, calm yet commanding like a king on an invisible throne. He recognized her instantly, his eyes briefly sweeping over her, but instead of a greeting or any hint of expression, he gave only a curt nod. A stiff gesture like a door shutting against the wind. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the point." His voice rang out, deep and sharp, like the toll of a bronze bell in an ancient temple. "The latest report shows steady growth, but there are unnecessary expenses quietly eroding our profits. I want solutions." The department heads began their presentations, dry numbers dancing in the air, proposals thrown out like chess pieces on a board. Olivia sat quietly, her pen scribbling furiously, ears straining to catch every word, eyes glued to her notebook as if it were a shield against Jordan's gaze. She was so focused that she didn't notice when, for a fleeting moment, he turned to look directly at her. His eyes like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, before swiftly shifting away before she could look up. The meeting ended with the sound of chairs shifting and scattered murmurs. Olivia stood, ready to blend into the exiting crowd, but a low, warm voice suddenly stopped her, holding her in place like an invisible tether. "Olivia." She turned, her body stiffening as if frozen, her heart pounding like war drums. Jordan leaned against the table, arms crossed, his face as cold as a stone statue. "Come with me," he said tersely, his voice steady but forceful enough to make her feel like she'd just received an order from a general. Olivia nodded, her trembling legs following him to his private office. A lavish space with a gleaming walnut desk and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like the eyes of a giant. He shut the door with a dry click, then gestured for her to sit across from him. She sank into the chair, feeling like a lamb lost in a wolf's lair. "You've been working here a few months," Jordan began, his voice deep like waves crashing against cliffs. "What do you think of the company so far?" Olivia blinked, caught off guard by a question that seemed simple yet heavy with meaning. "I really like it, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's challenging, sometimes makes me sweat bullets, but I've learned so much. From handling numbers to staying calm when the finance director looks at me like he wants to eat me alive." A faint smile flickered across Jordan's lips, gone as quickly as lightning in a storm. "And your plans for the future?" he pressed, his probing gaze seeming to dig into her soul. Olivia hesitated, her hands tightening around the edges of her notebook. She hadn't expected a man like Jordan to care about the personal dreams of a lowly employee like her. "I want to grow in finance, maybe land a more stable position, worry less about making ends meet. And who knows, someday I might chase a graduate degree. Though right now it feels more like a fool's dream than a real plan." Jordan nodded slowly as if savoring her words, then abruptly shifted gears. "Every night when you leave the building, I see you helping the homeless." Olivia's heart skipped a beat, like a clock dropped by careless hands. "What do you think of that, sir?" she stammered, her eyes fluttering like a panicked butterfly. "My office overlooks the main entrance," he replied, his tone calm. "I watch you every evening." Her face flushed, as if she'd been caught doing something secret. "Is there a problem with that, sir?" she asked, her voice quivering like dry leaves in the wind. "No," Jordan shook his head, a rare hint of unease flickering in his eyes. "I just don't understand. You do this every day, spending money, giving time with no expectation of praise or attention. Why?" Olivia exhaled, the tension melting away like clouds drifting past a mountaintop. She smiled softly, her eyes glowing with simple conviction. "I like helping, that's all. If I were in their shoes, cold, hungry, forgotten, I'd hope someone would do the same for me. It's a small thing, but to them it's like water in a desert." Jordan fell silent, his gaze locked on her, as if trying to unravel a complex riddle. Then he leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk, his voice low. "And you do this every day, don't you?" He sighed, muttering something to himself, perhaps strange indeed, before nodding. "You're fired." Olivia blinked, thinking she'd misheard, her heart plummeting into an abyss. But before she could react, he continued, "I mean, you can get back to work." She stood, her mind spinning like she just stepped out of a whirlwind, then quietly closed the door behind her. Standing in the hallway, she lingered for a moment, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her emotions. That evening, as always, she left the building with a bag from Borner Market, kneeling on the sidewalk to share food with the homeless. From his high window, Jordan still watched, but this time it wasn't just observation, he was trying to understand. Why would a young woman, with a meager salary barely enough for grand dreams, choose to share her warmth with strangers? He crossed his arms, an uneasy feeling stirring within, as if she were challenging him without even knowing it. Time flowed swiftly like a river rushing over rocks. Olivia settled into her rhythm at 4 Barrel. Days spent laboring over numbers and emails, afternoons stopping by Borner Market for supplies, evenings kneeling on the sidewalk to share small joys. She didn't know that Jordan still watched silently from above, his gaze now tinged not just with curiosity but with something deeper, respect, perhaps, or unease at a heart free of calculation. She never boasted, never sought glory or a pat on the back. She did it simply because she wanted to, purely, sincerely, like a breeze passing through without needing thanks. By Friday at month's end, her first paycheck shone like dawn after a long night. Olivia opened her banking app, her heart lightening at the sight of the sum. Not much, but enough to cover rent, pay off overdue bills, and buy groceries for the month ahead. She smiled, thinking of the days to come, unaware that Jordan, from his lofty office, was quietly preparing something greater. An offer that could change her life, just as she had quietly shifted the way he viewed the world. As the sunset descended, draping the city in a pale golden veil, Olivia Marie Smith stepped out of the 4 Barrel office, her heart still lingering on the familiar faces by the sidewalk. The workday had ended, but a thought clung to her mind like a tree's shadow etched on the ground, the image of old Gavin, her weathered friend from the windswept streets. He was always polite, always kind, though fate had cloaked him in a tattered coat like an old net. His shoes worn so thin they were little more than soulless husks. Then she thought of Elena, the frail woman curled up in a blanket as thin as paper against the biting cold. And Lucas too, a young man in his 20s, his bright eyes dulled by weariness, always claiming he'd soon escape this life, though day after day, he stood there empty-handed, waiting for a door that never opened. Olivia paused, her eyes sparkling with a bold idea. She knew she could do more than hand out loaves of bread and granola bars. Small gifts like grains of sand in a vast desert. Without a second thought, she changed course, her small but determined feet leading her to a nearby discount clothing store. There she picked out a thick coat for Gavin, a deep blue like the night sky, and a sturdy pair of shoes to replace the ragged heap he wore. She didn't stop there. A warm, soft blanket for Elena like a mother's embrace. A few clean outfits for Lucas, and some essentials for the others. Her meager budget stretched thin. She still dashed into a grocery store, gathering enough for a decent meal, fragrant mashed potatoes, canned meat, and even a bit of pastry to brighten their tired smiles. When she left the store, her wallet was as empty as a starving belly after a long day. But her heart was full, brimming like a harvest moon. She arrived at the familiar sidewalk, arms laden with bags, and when Gavin saw the new coat, his old eyes shimmered like an oil lamp in the dark. "Olivia, this is too much," he choked out, his trembling hands clutching the gift as if it might vanish. Elena hugged the blanket tight, exclaiming, "You're my angel truly." Lucas, who always tried to act tough as stone, stared quietly at the new sneakers, muttering, "These'll help me get a job for sure." Olivia smiled, that familiar warmth spreading through her chest like a winter hearth. "Don't thank me," she said, her voice soft as a breeze. "You do the same for me." That night, laughter rang out louder than usual, a harmony among these fragile lives. The homeless group gathered together, sharing food and simple joy, while Olivia stood by, quietly savoring the moment like an artist admiring a finished masterpiece. But then, glancing at her watch, a small but disastrous detail struck her. She had no money left to get home. She blinked, her mind racing for a solution. But her wallet was as barren as a broken jar. And the bus had become a distant luxury. "Guess I'll walk," she told herself, shrugging as if it were no big deal, though she knew full well her home was a long trek away like an endless fairy tale. 30 minutes passed, the streets growing quiet, the night's chill seeping through her thin coat as if to taunt her. Her feet ached in stiff office shoes, each step like walking on nails. She sighed, pulling her coat tighter, comforting herself. "It's still far, but it's fine. My legs aren't broken yet." Just then, headlights from a sleek black car sliced through the darkness, pulling up beside her like an unexpected savior. The window rolled down slowly, and when Olivia looked in, her heart skipped a beat. It was Jordan Wesley Brooks, his brows raised as if assessing the situation with a mathematician's precision. "How far were you planning to walk like this?" His voice was low and steady, tinged with surprise. Olivia opened her mouth, but the words caught somewhere in her throat. "Great, of all people it's him," she thought, then answered, "Home, sir," trying to sound casual as if walking miles in the cold night were routine. Jordan glanced at the pitch-black road ahead, his gaze piercing the darkness. "You live far." A brief silence settled. Then he leaned over, unlocking the door. "Get in." Olivia hesitated, her mind spinning with the thought. Hitch a ride with the CO? Sounds like a wild idea straight out of a novel. But her aching feet and the biting cold won out, and she climbed in, sighing as the heated seat enveloped her. Jordan drove in silence, the quiet so thick she could hear her own heartbeat. Then he glanced over, his voice low. "Why are you walking home?" Olivia shrugged, seeing no point in sugarcoating it. "I spent all my money." His fingers tightened on the steering wheel, as if he just heard something unbelievable. "You got paid today, didn't you? And you spent it all already." She nodded, hesitating before admitting, "I used it to help some homeless people." The car fell into a heavy silence, thick as the sky before a storm. Jordan turned to her, his eyes staring as if she'd just claimed to be an alien. "You spent your entire paycheck on strangers?" Olivia laughed, A nervous chime like wind bells. When you put it that way, it does sound like a dumb financial decision. Jordan blinked, clearly not expecting her to mock herself. Because it is, he replied, his tone dry. Olivia crossed her arms, gazing out the window as streetlights streaked by like falling stars. Not to me. He kept his eyes forward, but she sensed him processing her words, like a chef tasting an unfamiliar dish. After a moment he inhaled deeply and asked, "At least you've got rent money left, right?" Olivia smiled, her gaze drifting. "No, but I'll manage. I always do." Jordan let out a short laugh, not quite amused, more like he'd heard something beyond comprehension. "Unbelievable. You really?" He trailed off, shaking his head as if reining himself in. Olivia raised an eyebrow, curious. "I really what?" He glanced over, a rare warmth flickering in his eyes. "Different. That's a compliment if you're wondering." The rest of the drive passed in silence, but it wasn't awkward. A strange peace between two people from vastly different worlds. When the car stopped outside her rundown apartment building, Olivia opened the door and turned to him. "Good night, Mr. Jordan. And thanks for caring." She walked off, unaware that he lingered in the car for a few minutes, frowning as her figure faded, a question stirring within. Caring? Since when? On Monday morning, Jordan Wesley Brooks sat behind his desk, surrounded by reports and a packed schedule like a general's map. He was a man of efficiency, not emotion. His life a series of neat lines with no room for messy detours. But today something was off. He couldn't focus, his eyes drifting from the numbers, his mind pulled back to Friday night. Olivia walking alone in the cold, her hesitation before getting in the car, and the unbelievable story of spending her entire paycheck to help others. Her whole salary, he muttered, repeating it like a mantra, searching for a shred of logic in that reckless act. Olivia Marie Smith, bold, carefree, and sincere to a degree that baffled him. And for the first time, Jordan realized he didn't just want to understand her. He needed to, the way one needs light to escape the dark. The morning at Four Barrel passed in its familiar rhythm, like a classical piece no one paid attention to the melody of. Olivia Marie Smith arrived at the office right on time, her clock seemingly tied to every step she took. She settled at her desk, hands deftly handling paperwork, eyes gleaming with focus, completely unaware that from the top floor of the building, a piercing gaze tracked her every move. Jordan Wesley Brooks, the icy CEO with a heart as hard as granite, found himself lost in thoughts of this diminutive girl. "I can't keep ignoring this," he muttered, the pen in his hand tapping the desk like a drumbeat urging a decision. After an hour wrestling with reports he couldn't focus on, he sighed, picked up the phone and said in a voice low as an undercurrent, "Olivia Marie Smith, come to my office. Now." Downstairs, Olivia was buried in organizing a thick document when the message chimed. Her stomach tightened, not out of fear or so she told herself, but because the name Jordan Wesley Brooks felt like a massive boulder crashing into her chest. "Why does he want to see me?" she wondered, her heart racing like a rabbit fleeing a hound. She stood, smoothing her slightly wrinkled blouse, and walked down the hallway to the 35th floor, the sanctum of Four Barrels' king. Jordan's assistant greeted her with a curt nod, pointing to the dark wooden door as if to say, "Go on, he's waiting." Olivia took a deep breath, like a soldier preparing for battle, and turned the knob. Stepping inside, she saw Jordan seated behind his massive walnut desk, his expression as unreadable as the sky before a storm. "Close the door," he said, his voice steady but commanding. She complied, trying to stay calm despite her trembling hands. "You asked to see me, Mr. Jordan?" she asked, her voice small but clear, like wind chimes on a summer day. He clasped his hands on the desk, studying her like a scientist examining a rare specimen. "I want to understand something," he said slowly, each word dropping like a pebble into a still lake. "All right, what is it?" Olivia replied, crossing her arms, her head tilting like a curious bird. "Why do you do it?" Jordan continued, his voice deeper now. "Do what, sir?" She frowned, not yet grasping his meaning. "Spend your money helping people who'll never repay you." Olivia blinked, then let out a soft laugh, light as a breeze through a porch. "So that's why I'm here? You really want to know?" Jordan nodded, his gaze fixed on her as if trying to see into her soul. She stopped laughing, pondered for a moment, then answered, I do it because I can. Because every day I see them, tired faces, trembling hands, and I know no one else cares. And because, she paused, choosing her words like a gardener picking flowers, if I were them, I'd hope someone would do it for me. Jordan propped his elbows on the desk, leaning forward, his eyes like a smoldering fire. But you're not obligated to help them. No one's asking you to. Olivia smiled, a gentle but resolute smile, like moonlight in the dark. Since when do we need an obligation to do what's right? A heavy silence fell, weighty but not stifling. Jordan locked eyes with her, and Olivia didn't flinch, like two waves meeting on the open sea. He sighed, leaning back in his chair, a hand covering his face as if he'd just lost a chess match. You're unbelievable. I hear that a lot, she replied, grinning like a kid who'd won a game. Jordan shook his head, his expression that of someone facing an unsolvable riddle. You know you can't keep living like this, right? Spending everything, putting yourself in hardship. Olivia shrugged, light as a falling leaf. I know, but I always manage. He took a deep breath, his eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and admiration. Fine, you can get back to work. Olivia nodded and turned to leave, but before she reached the doorknob, Jordan's voice stopped her, tethering her like an invisible thread. If you need money, tell me. I'll cover your commute. She spun around, eyes wide, stunned as if she'd heard a fairy tale. Is this a joke? No, I'm serious, he said, his voice firm as a driven nail. Olivia narrowed her eyes, studying him for a moment. Thanks for the concern, Mr. Jordan, but I can handle it. He raised an eyebrow. That's what I thought, until you walked home alone in the cold last Friday. Just because you spent every cent on strangers. Olivia opened her mouth to argue but closed it, knowing he was right. Next time at least agree to a ride, he added, his tone dry yet oddly warm. She looked at him for a few seconds, then sighed. If there's a next time, I'll think about it. She stepped out, leaving Jordan staring after her, his mind brimming with unanswered questions. In the days that followed, Jordan kept noticing Olivia. Not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't stop. She was still herself. Working diligently, trading subtle jokes with colleagues, always ready to lend a hand. And every afternoon, she left the office, bags from Borner Market in hand, kneeling on the sidewalk to share warmth with the homeless. Jordan watched from his lofty window, restless like a sailor lost at sea. He wanted to understand, but the deeper he dug, the more lost he became. Olivia was a mystery, a breeze no one could catch. By the next Friday, rain poured unexpectedly, heavy drops pounding the streets like a symphony of fury. Olivia stood in the lobby, peering outside, sighing at the thought of the soggy journey ahead. She opened her tiny umbrella and stepped out, but before she got far, a sleek black car glided up beside her and stopped. The window rolled down, revealing Jordan Wesley Brooks, his expression a mix of surprise and irritation. Unbelievable, you're going out in this rain? Olivia blinked, smiling sheepishly. I'll be fine. He sighed, unlocking the door. Get in. She hesitated, muttering. Is this a habit now? Jordan's lips twitched. Don't make it weird, just get in. Olivia laughed, climbing into the car, the warmth from the heated seat wrapping around her like an old friend's hug. The car rolled on, rain tapping steadily against the glass, the silence so thick she could hear her own breathing. Then Jordan broke it. Have you ever thought about asking for a raise? Olivia frowned, caught off guard. Your salary is obviously not enough. You've never asked for more. She chuckled, a sound light as wind chimes. I figured I'd need to work at least a year before dreaming of that. Jordan glanced over, a rare glint of mischief in his eyes. Maybe you don't have to. Olivia studied him, curious. What do you mean? He shrugged. I mean you're worth more to this company than you think. She blinked, stunned. Is that a compliment? But before she could press further, the car stopped outside her rundown apartment. She grabbed the door handle, then turned back. Mr. Jordan, why are you doing this? He paused, his gaze deep as a well. Because for the first time, I actually want to understand you. Olivia's heart beat faster, but she just smiled and stepped out. Before disappearing, she turned back. Good night, Mr. Jordan. Thanks for the ride. Jordan watched her go, and for the first time in years, A rare smile flickered on his lips, small but enough to light up his stern face. He sat there muttering, "How can I not care when you keep proving me wrong?" Olivia Marie Smith, with her vast heart and simple sincerity, had planted a seed of curiosity in him, a seed that even Jordan Wesley Brooks, a man of reason and numbers, couldn't extinguish. In recent days, Jordan Wesley Brooks, a man accustomed to viewing the world through the lens of numbers and profit, began to notice something strange, as if someone had secretly painted a vibrant stroke across the monochrome canvas of his life. It wasn't just the unexpected car rides or the way Olivia Marie Smith spent money so absurdly that it made him shake his head in disbelief. Now he found himself attuned to her presence in the four-barrel office. It was the way she delivered subtle jokes, light as a breeze through a porch, making colleagues laugh without realizing she just sprinkled a bit of sunshine into their dreary workday. It was the way she furrowed her brow when focused, her delicate eyebrows knitting together like two birds perched on a branch, or the way she quietly helped others without seeking praise. What unsettled him most was that she seemed oblivious to her own impact, like an oil lamp burning brightly in the dark, needing no one to light a thank you. That Monday morning, Jordan sat in his office behind the polished walnut desk, eyes fixed on a stack of reports, but his mind drifting elsewhere. The murmur of conversation outside his door pulled him from his thoughts. "Olivia, got a second?" Mark, a finance director, asked, his voice low but tinged with a plea. "Of course, what's up?" Olivia replied, her tone gentle like a babbling brook, cheerful as the morning sun. "I need help with a report. Can you take a look?" A brief pause followed, as if she were weighing something monumental, then she said, "I'm not sure I'm the best for this, but I can try." Jordan frowned, his pen halting its tapping on the desk. Why does she always doubt herself? He wondered, a flicker of inexplicable irritation rising within him. He knew Olivia outperformed most of the finance team, those who sometimes strutted around like peacocks flashing their feathers. She had a knack for turning dry numbers into a soulful melody, yet it was as if she confined herself to a shadowed corner, unwilling to step into the light. And the strangest part was that he, Jordan Wesley Brooks, a man who never cared about anyone's feelings, wanted her to see her own worth, to pull her from that self-imposed shadow like a gardener uprooting weeds to let a flower bloom. At the end of the day, from his lofty window, Jordan looked down and saw Olivia leaving the building, heading toward Borner Market as usual. He wasn't surprised, her routine had etched itself into his mind like the rhythm of an old song. But today something was off. Olivia wasn't smiling as she normally did. There was no cheerful wave of her hand or sparkle in her eyes as she picked out items. He squinted, tracking her steps through the thick glass. Inside the store, Olivia quietly gathered a few things: bread, fruit juice, granola bars, but her movements were slow, like an artist painting the final stroke on a melancholy canvas. At the checkout, she opened her wallet, her gaze sweeping over the meager sum left, then freezing. This month's paycheck had vanished faster than she'd expected. Rent, bills, groceries for the week ahead, all crashing over her like relentless waves swallowing her coins. She never minded sacrificing comfort for others, but today, reality struck like a cold slap, making her falter for a moment. "Olivia?" The cashier, a lanky guy with a kind smile, called out as she hesitated. She forced a smile, masking her worry like an actor forgetting lines on stage. "I'll take less today, but I'll make up for it next week," she said, her voice light but quivering like a taut string about to snap. The cashier nodded, bagged her items, and Olivia stepped outside, hands clutching the bag, her heart heavy. She crossed the street to the homeless group, but this time the familiar warmth in her chest was gone. She handed out the food as always, but her eyes lingered on Gavin, Elena, and Lucas with a silent question. What if one day I can't help them anymore? For the first time she doubted her own kindness, not out of regret, but out of fear that the small flame she'd kindled might flicker out in the cold winds of everyday life. From the top floor, Jordan Wesley Brooks watched it all. He noticed the difference in her movements, slow, weary, like a bird with a broken wing still trying to fly. There was something in her gaze as she looked at the homeless, a subtle sadness his sharp eyes couldn't miss. Without a second thought, he grabbed his phone, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Olivia Marie Smith, come to my office. Now." Downstairs, Olivia was packing up, preparing to leave when the message chimed. She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if carrying a storm cloud. What does Jordan Wesley Brooks want now? She muttered, exhaustion clinging to her like dew on grass. With what little energy she had left, she grabbed her badge and trudged to the elevator, heading to the 35th floor, where Four Barrels King awaited. As the office door swung open, Olivia stepped in, her sleepy eyes struggling to maintain composure. Jordan sat behind his desk, his gaze icy yet tinged with a rare hint of concern. "Close the door," he said, his voice steady as waves on a shore. She obeyed, standing there, arms crossed like a fragile shield. "You called me?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He clasped his hands on the desk, studying her for a long moment, like a hunter sizing up prey. "You're different today," he said bluntly, cutting to the chase. Olivia blinked, caught off guard. "How can I be different when I'm like this every day?" she replied, injecting a touch of humor to lighten the heavy air. Jordan raised an eyebrow, not letting her deflect. "You didn't smile at the market. You bought less. Something's wrong, isn't it?" Olivia opened her mouth to protest but closed it, realizing he'd seen through her like an open book. She sighed, shrugging. "My paycheck ran out faster than I thought. I still have rent bills, but I didn't want them to go without." Jordan leaned forward, his eyes smoldering like a quiet fire. "Then why didn't you say something? Why keep pushing yourself into the dark like that?" Olivia gave a faint smile, a sad one like a dim moon. "Because I don't want to bother anyone. And because I still have enough strength, at least for today." Jordan shook his head, his fingers tapping the desk as if to dispel her stubbornness. "You're unbelievable. But this time let me help. I'll give you a raise, not out of pity, but because you deserve it." Olivia looked up, eyes wide as if she'd heard a fairy tale. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he replied, his voice solid as stone. She fell silent for a moment, then let out a soft laugh, light as wind chimes in a storm. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan. But I'll manage on my own for now, at least until I really have no other choice." He watched her leave, a strange feeling stirring within him, frustration mixed with admiration. Olivia Marie Smith, with her vast heart and quiet resilience, had once again forced him, a man of reason, to question himself. When Olivia Marie Smith stepped into the office, Jordan Wesley Brooks was already there, leaning against the gleaming walnut desk like a general preparing to inspect his troops. His arms were crossed over his chest, his sharp gaze sweeping over her like a spotlight piercing the night. He remained silent for a moment, studying her as a jeweler might examine an uncut gem. "Close the door," he said, his voice low and steady like waves crashing against a rocky shore. Olivia raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise mixed with curiosity crossing her face, but she obediently complied. "Mr. Jordan," she began, her tone light but tinged with unease. "If this is about what we discussed before, I told you I'm fine." "Are you?" Jordan replied, his eyes like a honed blade slicing through the fragile shield of confidence she tried to uphold. He was too skilled at reading people, and right now Olivia was an open book, each page turning under his discerning gaze. "You bought less today than usual." Olivia froze, her eyes widening like a deer caught in headlights. "You were watching me," she stammered, grappling with the idea that this cold CEO paid attention to her every step. "I'm always watching you," Jordan said, his voice dry but laced with a subtle humor she barely caught. Olivia blinked rapidly, as if confronted with a riddle she couldn't solve. "Mr. Jordan, I know you think my habits are strange, but I really don't need to ask for a raise." Jordan tilted his head, his arms crossing tighter, his gaze smoldering like a quiet flame. "You deserve a raise whether you ask for it or not." Olivia frowned, her delicate eyebrows knitting together like two butterflies brushing wings. "I don't think now's the right time." He narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping like distant thunder. "You work harder than most people here. You deserve to be paid more. Or are you planning to wait a whole year, scraping by on pennies, just to realize your own worth?" Olivia swallowed hard, her throat dry as a desert under a blazing sun. She didn't know how to respond. His words were a mirror, forcing her to face herself. Jordan watched her for a moment longer, then sighed, the sound like a breeze rustling through ancient trees. "You need to learn to value yourself." Olivia averted her eyes, glancing toward the corner of the room as if to escape his piercing stare. "I know my worth," she said, but her voice lacked conviction, wavering like a kite in unsteady winds. He gave a faint smile, a rare one edged with challenge. "No, you don't. But I do." Olivia's heart beat faster, a drumroll in her chest. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice a whisper in the stillness of the night. Jordan fell silent, his gaze deep as a well. "Because I want to understand you," he replied, and then as if pulled from his own armor he added, "and because for some reason I care." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. Not just to her but to anyone. Olivia blinked, so stunned she nearly dropped her heart to the floor. Then she did something that caught Jordan off guard. She smiled, a smile as bright as a full moon. "You're a very unusual CEO, Mr. Jordan." He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "And you're the most stubborn employee I've ever met." She laughed, a crisp sound like wind chimes, and he responded with a faint smile. The first time since meeting Olivia Marie Smith that Jordan Wesley Brooks felt a spark of warmth seep into his heart. He no longer just wanted to understand her. He wanted to see what would happen if he kept caring about this strange girl. In the days that followed, things shifted, though only in small ripples across a still lake. Olivia remained herself, dedicated to her work, still kneeling on the sidewalk each evening to share warmth with the homeless. But Jordan no longer watched from afar through a cold window. He called her to his office more often, not to check on her but to talk, to challenge her with deeper questions. He wanted to see her shine, like a gem polished under light. With each passing day he grew more certain. Olivia was unlike anyone he'd ever met. A flower blooming amid gravel, fragile yet resilient, bewildering yet captivating. Jordan Wesley Brooks had always been a master of strategy, building a billion-dollar empire with razor-sharp intellect and a coldness like tempered steel. He surrounded himself with the ambitious, those who thought only of themselves. But Olivia didn't play that game. She didn't try to impress, didn't chase glory or a nod from above. She was simply herself, sincere, devoted, and profound in a way that unsettled him. He hated to admit it, but her difference was impossible to ignore, like a spotlight shining into the shadowed corners of his soul. On Tuesday morning, Jordan strode into his office, the air still laced with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. He summoned a director, his voice rumbling like thunder. "Prepare the operating cost report from last quarter. I want it on my desk by the end of the week." The man nodded, about to leave, but Jordan added unexpectedly, "And put Olivia Marie Smith on the team." The director blinked, stunned as if struck by lightning. "Olivia Marie Smith? The junior assistant? She's new. Are you sure she can handle it?" Jordan crossed his arms, his gaze icy. "I want to see what she's capable of." Downstairs, Olivia was hunched over a report when the email arrived. She frowned, reading each line carefully. "Last quarter's operating cost project, report to the board." Her name was on the team, stark as black ink on white paper. "How could this be a mistake?" she muttered, doubt swirling within her. Before she could think further, a message from Jordan popped up. "Come to my office. Now." She took a deep breath, stood, and walked with heavy steps, her heart weighed down like a sky full of worry. When she pushed the door open, Jordan was standing by his desk, holding a steaming cup of coffee. He looked up, his gaze like a wind sweeping across a field. "Close the door," he said. Olivia obeyed, trying to stay calm despite her pounding heart. "Mr. Jordan, this email. There's no way it's right. My name's on the project. I'm just an assistant." He raised an eyebrow, sipping his coffee as if it were a trivial matter. "You've got experience now." Olivia blinked, dumbfounded. "That's how it works." He shrugged, the corner of his mouth twitching. "It does with me." She narrowed her eyes, suspicious like a cat eyeing a mouse. "Is this a test?" Jordan gave a faint smile, a rare one like sunlight breaking through clouds. "What if it is?" Olivia crossed her arms, her voice edged with defiance. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her for a few seconds, his gaze deep as the ocean floor. "Because I think you're better than you realize. I want to see if I'm right." Olivia fell silent, a strange feeling stirring within her. For the first time, someone believed in her before she believed in herself. And that, to her, was as fresh as dawn after a long, dark night. The week sped by like a gust of wind sweeping through a meadow, carrying challenges Olivia Marie Smith could never have anticipated. The last quarter's operating cost project wasn't a smooth path. It was a labyrinth of twisting numbers, dusty reports needing analysis, and intricate financial details like a classical score she had to learn to play with her own hands. Yet strangely, she didn't falter. The challenge was like a smoldering ember, making her sweat while igniting a quiet joy within her. On Thursday evening, as the office lights dimmed, Olivia sat there, eyes glued to the screen, fingers gliding over rows of data like a weaver meticulously finishing a tapestry. An unexpected email from Jordan Wesley Brooks popped up. "Is the report ready?" She smiled, typing quickly. "Almost done, just a few final tweaks." Seconds later, his reply flashed back like lightning. "Meet me in my office. Now." Olivia swallowed hard, her heart pounding like distant drums. She stood, adjusted her blouse, and headed to the 35th floor with the feeling of a soldier marching into battle. When the door opened, Jordan sat behind his desk, calm as a rock in a river, holding a stack of papers. He looked up, his sharp gaze sweeping over her, then pointed to the chair across from him. "Sit." Olivia obeyed, her hands gripping the chair's edge, a flicker of unease stirring like a small bird before a storm. He picked up a copy of her report, flipping through it, his eyes scanning swiftly like an autumn breeze. After a tense silence, he looked up. "It's better than I expected." Olivia raised an eyebrow, surprised as if she'd heard a riddle. "Is that a compliment?" Jordan gave a faint smile, the corner of his mouth twitching like sunlight sneaking through clouds. "You decide." She rolled her eyes, but the smile on her lips couldn't hide a small spark of joy. He set the report on the desk, his voice low and steady. "The presentation's tomorrow. Are you ready?" Olivia hesitated, her fingers tapping a rhythm on her thigh as if counting her heartbeats, then nodded. "I'm ready, sir." Jordan studied her for a few more seconds, his gaze deep as a well, then said unexpectedly, "Good work, Olivia." She froze, her eyes widening as if thunder had struck a clear sky. Praise from Jordan Wesley Brooks, the man as cold as ice, was like a rare gem falling into unsuspecting hands. She took a deep breath, smiling. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan." He nodded, but within him, a new sensation stirred. He didn't just want to understand her anymore. He wanted to see her grow, and for a man like him, that was dangerously unfamiliar. Friday arrived like a whirlwind, bringing the presentation to the board. The meeting room was packed with stern faces, suits stiff as wax figures. Jordan entered, taking his seat at the head of the table, his eyes flicking to Olivia with a subtle nod, small, but enough to bolster her like a surge of strength. She took a deep breath, stood, her voice ringing out clear as a bell in a cathedral. She spoke about operating costs, each chart unfolding like a vivid painting, each number dissected like a note in a symphony. For the first time, she felt she belonged, not just the quiet little assistant in the corner, but part of a grander picture. When she finished, the room fell silent, taut as a string about to snap. Then a board member clapped, others followed, and applause rang out like the first rain of the season. Olivia stood there, hardly believing her eyes, her heart warm as a winter hearth. Jordan watched her, a rare glint of pride in his eyes, like a father quietly observing his child take a step forward. Olivia Marie Smith wasn't accustomed to the spotlight. She'd always worked hard, flowing silently like a river through a valley, heedless of praise or admiring glances. But after that presentation, things shifted. Colleagues began to see her differently. Nods of greeting grew friendlier, some even shyly sought her advice, as if she were a lantern they'd just discovered in the fog. On Monday morning, as she stepped into the office, a white envelope sat neatly on her desk, her name written in a firm hand. She frowned, opened it, and found a brief note. "Great job on the presentation. Consider this encouragement. JWB." Inside was a substantial bonus alongside her paycheck, enough to take her breath away. "Is this for real?" she muttered, her heart swelling with astonishment. Before she could process it, a low, warm voice sounded beside her. "Good morning." She turned to see Jordan standing there, hands in his pockets, his face as neutral as a stone statue. "Mr. Jordan, this is a bonus?" He nodded, a flicker of mischief in his eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. "Because you deserve it." he replied, his tone solid as a driven nail. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Jordan wasn't the type of boss to dole out casual pats on the back. His praise was as precious as gold, and that moved her more than she'd expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching like a stream meeting a rock. He merely nodded, turned away, leaving Olivia standing there, trying to grasp what was blossoming between them. An invisible thread, fragile yet resilient as spider silk. In the days that followed, Jordan changed, not loudly but quietly like a river shifting course. He called Olivia into more meetings, asking her input on decisions typically reserved for executives, those who strutted like peacocks flaunting their plumes. He looked at her differently, not as bright as sunlight but as soft as moonlight, and sometimes she caught herself looking back, a flicker of inexplicable curiosity stirring within. One evening after work, Olivia left the building, hands carrying bags from Borner Market as usual. As she stepped out, a sleek black car pulled up across the street, the window rolling down slowly. Jordan Wesley Brooks appeared, his voice tinged with humor. "You're really going to keep doing this, even after the bonus?" Olivia laughed, the sound crisp as wind chimes. "Of course." He watched her for a moment, then opened the car door. "Get in. I want to see this for myself." She blinked, stunned as if she'd heard a fairy tale. "You want what?" "I want to see it with my own eyes," he said, his tone dry but resolute. Olivia hesitated, but an inner voice urged her forward. For the first time, Jordan Wesley Brooks, the man of expensive suits and icy reason, joined her to visit the homeless community. The scene was almost comical. Gavin, the gray-bearded old man, eyed Jordan like an alien creature, his skeptical gaze scanning from head to toe. "You're Olivia's boss?" Jordan nodded, arms crossed. "That's right," Gavin huffed softly. "Never thought I'd see a suit down here." "Surprise, surprise," Jordan replied, his tone deadpan. Olivia had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. As she handed out the food, Jordan stood by, silently observing. He saw the genuine thanks, the radiant smiles, and the real impact of the simple kindness she brought, like a drop of water soothing a desert thirst. When they finished, Olivia turned to him. "So what do you think?" Jordan paused, his gaze like a still lake. "It's different seeing it up close like this." She smiled, her voice teasing. "Helping people feels good. You should try it more often." He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Don't get used to it." Olivia laughed heartily, but deep down, she sensed a small shift in Jordan Wesley Brooks, a seed just beginning to sprout, one he might not even recognize himself. In the days that followed, the relationship between Olivia Marie Smith and Jordan Wesley Brooks shifted. Not with the clamor of a storm but quietly, like a stream threading through crevices in stone. It lingered in fleeting glances that lasted a second too long, in conversations as easy as afternoon tea between old friends, and above all, in an invisible bond growing ever stronger, one neither dared to name but couldn't deny. Like two wayward stars gradually finding each other in the night sky, they were drawing closer, though neither ventured to ask, "Where will this lead us?" For Olivia, she'd never imagined that in such a short time, she'd feel so much a part of Four Barrel. The successful presentation, the unexpected bonus like a gift from the heavens, and above all, that night when Jordan stepped out of his comfort zone to join her in helping the homeless. All of it had painted a new stroke of color onto the canvas of her life. Not only did her colleagues begin to see her differently, but her connection with Jordan shifted too, a silent duet they both understood, though neither dared to voice it aloud. But that very change stirred unease in some, like dark clouds gathering silently before a storm. On a day like any other, Olivia was hunched over a pile of documents, the glow of her computer screen casting faint streaks of light across her face. An abrupt notification chimed, an urgent email from the finance director. "I need to see you now. Conference room 3. She frowned, a ripple of unease stirring within her like a sailor hearing strange waves in the distance. "What's this about?" she muttered, grabbing her worn notebook and stepping out with a quicker pace than usual. When she pushed open the conference room door, she saw the finance director, the department manager, and two other supervisors seated around the table, their faces taut as strings about to snap. A thick stack of printed documents sat in the center, the air heavy like the sky before rain. Olivia took a seat, her hands trembling slightly beneath the table. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small but clear, like a bird's call in a deep forest. The director cut straight to the point, his voice cold as ice. These are the reports you submitted last week. He pointed to the stack in front of him. Olivia nodded, recognizing them as the operating cost report she'd painstakingly completed. But then he slammed another set of papers onto the table, the sound sharp like a stone dropping. And this is the version reviewed by the audit team. There are serious discrepancies in the numbers. Olivia's brow furrowed, doubt surging within her. I'm sorry, what's going on? The manager crossed his arms, his gaze sharp as a blade. You're being accused of manipulating financial data. Her heart sank like a bird shot mid-flight in a clear sky. This is a mistake, she exclaimed, hands scrambling to check the documents. The figures were starkly different from her original submission, but not by her doing. These aren't my numbers. This report's been altered, she said, her voice firm as a rock in a rushing stream. The director raised an eyebrow, his expression unmoved. Are you sure? Olivia felt her face flush, a fire flaring in her chest. I'd never do that. I swear. The manager studied her for a long moment, then sighed, the sound heavy like wine through an old door. I'm sorry, Olivia, but the board has decided to suspend you pending investigation. She felt the ground beneath her dissolve, leaving only a cold void. Suspend? She echoed, her voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. It's standard procedure, the director explained, his tone mechanical. During the investigation, you'll be on leave and barred from company systems. Olivia tried to process each word, but her mind spun, clinging to one thought. This can't be happening. Hours later she left the building, clutching a box of personal items. A few pens, her notebook, and the shards of trust now broken. Colleagues glanced at her, some with curiosity like she was a strange animal, others whispering like wind through leaves, a few avoiding her gaze as if dodging their own shadows. Her chest tightened, as if an invisible rope were squeezing her. Then a familiar voice sounded behind her. Olivia. She turned to see Jordan Wesley Brooks striding toward her, his steps swift like a soldier heading to battle, his face stern but his eyes ablaze with fury. So you've heard, she muttered, her heart heavy as a storm-laden sky. He stopped in front of her, his piercing gaze sweeping over her face like a spotlight cutting through the night. What the hell is going on? Olivia bit her lip, trying to hold back the wave of despair rising within her. I've been suspended. They're accusing me of tampering with data. Jordan's eyes darkened, like the sky before a massive storm. For what? I don't know, she replied, her voice breaking like a dam bursting. But I have no way to prove I'm innocent. He fell silent for a moment, arms crossed, a dangerous glint in his eyes like a predator poised to strike. Who reviewed your report? Olivia took a deep breath, striving for calm. The finance director and a supervisor. But I swear, Jordan, I didn't do this. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze like a knife slicing through the fog of doubt. I believe you. Olivia blinked, stunned as if thunder had struck a clear sky. You believe me? Jordan inhaled deeply, as if reining in the anger surging in his chest. Give me some time. I'll fix this. Olivia shook her head, her hands tightening around the box like clinging to a fragile hope. Jordan, you can't just jump in. This could hurt you. He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching into a defiant smirk. You really think I care about that? She didn't answer, just stood there, eyes wide like a lost deer. Jordan stepped closer, his voice dropping low, warm as a whisper in the dead of night. Don't go far. This isn't over. His words were like an oil lamp illuminating a dark corner of her heart. For the first time, someone was willing to fight for her. Not out of duty, but from a simple, fierce belief. Olivia looked at him, a strange mix of emotions swelling within her. Gratitude, trust, and a flicker of fear as she realized their bond had deepened more than she'd imagined. Jordan turned away, his back steady as a mountain in the wind, but in his mind a silent question echoed. What am I doing? And he knew, though he didn't want to admit it, that Olivia Marie Smith had become an indispensable part of his world, like moonlight guiding him through the dark. 2 days passed in Olivia Marie Smith's small apartment like a quiet wind sweeping through a desolate field, leaving her adrift with nothing to cling to. She sat there on an old sofa with frayed fabric, her vacant eyes staring out the window where pale sunlight struggled through thin curtains. No job, no destination, just a swarm of thoughts buzzing like bees without a hive. How could she prove her innocence? How could she escape this nightmare? She held a cold cup of coffee, her hand trembling like dry leaves in the wind, her heart heavy as a storm-laden sky. But then on Wednesday afternoon, as the sunset bathed the room in gold, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I've found something. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. JWB. Her heart pounded like war drums. Jordan Wesley Brooks, that man had uncovered something? The next morning Olivia stepped into the 4-barrel building. Her feet steady but her heart brimming with nervous anticipation, like a sailor facing towering waves. All eyes turned to her as she strode through the hallway, curious probing gazes, as if she were an odd painting hung in a gallery. But she paid them no mind, her thoughts were fixed on one place, Jordan's office. When she pushed the door open, her heart nearly stopped. Jordan wasn't alone. The finance manager and a supervisor sat there, their faces taut as strings about to snap, their hands fidgeting on the table. Jordan, in contrast, leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his demeanor calm as a mountain amid a storm, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Sit down," he said, his voice low and steady like waves against a shore. Olivia obeyed, sensing the air heavy as a sky before a downpour. Jordan locked eyes with the manager, his gaze smoldering like a quiet flame. "Why didn't you tell her what we just found?" The manager swallowed hard, his throat dry as a desert. "There was an error in the audit report," he stammered, his voice shaky like dry leaves in the wind. "A file mix-up. The data was altered but not by her. It was an internal mistake." Olivia raised an eyebrow, a wave of relief crashing against a tide of anger, like a swell breaking on rocks. "So you suspended me without even checking the facts?" she asked, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. The supervisor bowed his head, ashamed like a thief caught red-handed, while the manager muttered, "It was a hasty decision." Jordan slammed his hand on the desk, the sharp sound startling the room like thunder in a clear sky. "A hasty decision," he growled, his eyes darkening like a storm brewing. "You nearly ruined an exceptional employee's career because of your incompetence." The two men shrank back like dry grass before a blaze. "This won't be overlooked," Jordan continued, his voice cold as ice. "I want a formal apology sent to Olivia and a detailed report on this error." The manager nodded frantically, like a frightened pup before its master. "Of course, Mr. Jordan." He turned to Olivia, his gaze softening like moonlight through clouds. "You can return to work immediately." She held her breath, stunned as if hearing a fairy tale. "Really?" Jordan's lips twitched, a rare smile flickering like sunlight through leaves. "Honestly, I'm surprised you'd even want to stay after this mess." Olivia laughed, the sound crisp as wind chimes on a summer day. "I'm not the type to give up easily." Jordan returned a faint smile, his eyes glinting with a touch of pride. "I've noticed." As Olivia left the office, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders, like a bird escaping an iron cage. She was back, but more than that, she knew Jordan Wesley Brooks stood by her. A man who hadn't just pulled her from a nightmare but lit a path through the darkness. Deep down, that meant more than any bonus or praise. If he hadn't stepped in, she might still be floundering in despair, trying to prove what she hadn't done. She owed him a debt, a feeling she, who hated being indebted, found uncomfortable, especially to the company's CEO. Yet strangely, the thought that Jordan cared warmed her, a sensation both comforting and unsettling, like a hot cup of tea on a cold winter day. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at 4-barrel shifted, like a field after a rain shower, fresh yet still damp with old memories. Olivia noticed her colleagues' gazes change. Gone were the sneers or cheap curiosity, replaced by respect tinged with admiration, as if she were a warrior emerging from battle. "Not everyone comes out of something like that," someone whispered behind her, and she smiled quietly, her heart light as drifting clouds. But what caught her attention most was Jordan. He was different, not loudly but subtly, like a river altering its course. He passed her desk more often, his steps deliberately slow, his voice asking about reports more frequently than necessary. His gaze when he looked at her was different too, not as stark as sunlight, but gentle as moonlight, leaving her momentarily flustered, like a deer lost in a deep forest. Then one Friday afternoon, as Olivia waded through a flood of emails, her phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. "Dinner tonight. Will you come?" She raised an eyebrow, staring at the screen as if it had just spoken to her. "He's inviting me to dinner," she muttered, her heart stirring with a mix of nerves and curiosity. She bit her lip, typing back. "Is this an invitation or a summons?" Seconds later he replied, "A summons." Olivia rolled her eyes, but a soft laugh escaped like wind chimes. "Call it a celebration for pulling you out of that damned mess," he added. She sighed dramatically, fingers flying. "So it's a trap to remind me I owe you, right?" "Exactly. Meet you at 8. I'll send the address." Olivia closed her eyes, her mind a tangled mess. "This is a bad idea," she told herself, rubbing her forehead as if preparing for a battle with an unknown outcome. But deep within, a small voice whispered, "Go." She knew she'd say yes, not for the bonus, not for the job, but for something bigger, as vague as moonlight in the dark. Jordan Wesley Brooks, the cold man of numbers and strategy, was opening a new door, and Olivia, though she didn't want to admit it, was curious to step through. That night, Olivia Marie Smith arrived at the restaurant earlier than the appointed time. Her steps unsteady and high heels like a fawn learning to run. The place was so luxurious it overwhelmed her. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers sparkled like stars. An air of elegance emanated from crisp white tablecloths, and the gentle strains of a violin floated through the room like an autumn breeze. This was certainly not her familiar territory, where a granola bar and a glass of water sufficed as a decent dinner. As she entered, a poised hostess with a professional smile led her to a secluded table where Jordan Wesley Brooks was already waiting. He looked up, his sharp gaze sweeping over her. Then the corner of his mouth lifted into a small smile. "Punctual. I like that." Olivia raised an eyebrow, sitting down with a touch of awkwardness. "This place is too fancy for someone like me, Mr. Jordan. I thought you were inviting me to a sandwich joint." Jordan chuckled, the sound low and warm like a bronze bell in an ancient temple. "I wanted to impress you." Olivia picked up the menu, pretending to study it like a scholar poring over an ancient manuscript, though her eyes stole a glance at him. "Impress me, huh?" He raised his glass of red wine, his gaze glinting over the rim like an oil lamp in the dark. "Obviously." She felt a flush of warmth creep up her neck, like a small flame smoldering beneath ashes. "All right, so what's the real reason for this dinner?" Jordan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his demeanor calm as a mountain in the wind. "I wanted to see how you're holding up after everything." Olivia frowned, her delicate eyebrows knitting together like two butterflies brushing wings. "I'm fine." He raised an eyebrow, his probing gaze seeming to pierce her soul. "Are you sure?" She hesitated, her hands twisting together under the table like a rope caught in the wind. Then she sighed, the sound light but heavy like falling autumn leaves. "Okay, honestly, it was awful." Jordan nodded, a faint smile flickering like sunlight through clouds. "I'm glad you're honest. And how do you feel now?" Olivia pondered, her eyes drifting to the wine glass on the table as if it were a mirror reflecting her heart. "I guess I'm stronger than I thought." He smiled, his eyes lighting up with a rare hint of pride. "Exactly." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and in that instant, she realized this wasn't just an ordinary dinner. The air between them carried a new weight, an invisible thread taut yet warm, that both felt but neither dared to name. The conversation that followed flowed like a cool stream, no longer stilted or distant. Olivia discovered that when Jordan relaxed, he wasn't as intimidating as he seemed in the office. He had a dry, sardonic sense of humor, like a bitter wine that left a sweet aftertaste. And Jordan realized Olivia was more captivating when not buried in reports. Her smile was like a full moon, gentle yet irresistible. After over an hour of talking, the waiter brought the bill. Olivia reached for her purse, but Jordan stopped her with a look sharp as a blade. "You're not thinking of paying, are you?" She raised an eyebrow, her hand hovering over the table. "Can't I split it?" "Not some outdated chivalry," he replied, a smile brushing past like a breeze through a porch. "Call it tradition." Olivia rolled her eyes, but her lips curved into a reluctant smile. As they stepped out of the restaurant, the air between them shifted, heavier like the sky before rain. yet warm like an old friend's embrace. For the first time, Olivia felt she was playing with fire. Jordan Wesley Brooks' attention wasn't something easily dismissed, and now it shone as clear as a spotlight piercing the darkness within her. He opened the car door for her, his manner as gallant as a gentleman from a classic novel. Before she stepped in, he said unexpectedly, "I enjoyed tonight." Olivia swallowed hard, her heart pounding like drums in a deep forest. "If this is just dinner, don't get used to it." Jordan smiled, his eyes twinkling like stars. Too late. She ducked into the car, her mind spinning as if caught in a whirlwind, unable to process the true weight of his words. But one thing was certain, things between them would never be the same. A dinner, however unconventional, had added a bold stroke to the canvas of their relationship, and Olivia knew, despite her attempts to deny it, she was stepping onto a new path, both enticing and daunting. The following Monday, Olivia returned to the office, hoping things would settle back into the familiar rhythm of a quietly flowing river. But no, the atmosphere was different, like a field after rain, fresh yet still damp with lingering memories. Jordan didn't act differently. He remained the stoic boss with steady strides and a low, even voice. Yet Olivia sensed the change, in the way he looked at her, a touch of gentleness like moonlight sneaking through clouds. In the way colleagues glanced at her, curiosity mingled with admiration after that dinner. And above all, in the way her heart raced whenever he was near. This is a big problem, she thought, because Jordan Wesley Brooks wasn't someone to trifle with. He was a towering mountain, and she, though resilient, was just a small bird. That morning, as she hunched over a report, a throat-clearing sound came from beside her. She looked up to see Jordan standing there, hands in his pockets, his face as neutral as a stone statue. "Will you join the CEO for coffee?" Olivia blinked, stunned as if thunder had struck a clear sky. "Is that an invitation?" He smirked, a smile flitting by like a breeze through leaves. "It's a summons." She rolled her eyes, but a grin broke through as she stood. They walked to the company cafe together, and Olivia noticed the eyes following them, colleagues whispering like wine through grass, but Jordan paid no mind, his presence steady as a mountain in a storm. At the counter, he ordered without asking her, "Black coffee, no sugar." Olivia crossed her arms, raising a challenging eyebrow. "You think you know me that well?" Jordan gave a faint smile, his eyes glinting like an oil lamp. "I think so." She tried not to admit he was probably right. The way he nailed her preference left her both flustered and amused. They took their coffees and sat in a quiet corner, where the office noise faded to a distant hum. Jordan was silent for a moment, his gaze deep as a well, then said unexpectedly, "Olivia, I want you to join more executive meetings." She nearly choked on her coffee, her hand trembling as she set the cup down. "Wait, what?" He looked at her, his voice serious as a bronze bell. "You have potential. I want to see how far you can go." Olivia blinked, her mind whirling like a small tornado. "And if I don't want to? Give me a good reason," he replied, his gaze challenging like a blade. She bit her lip, a vague fear swirling within her. She wanted to try, but the shadow of failure loomed like dark clouds overhead. Jordan seemed to sense it, his voice lowering, warm as a whisper in the dead of night. "You're afraid of failing." Olivia took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Aren't you?" Jordan rested his hand on the table, his eyes locking onto hers like a blazing fire. "I make mistakes too, but I've learned to fail without fear." Olivia fell silent, her heart rippling like a lake struck by a stone. He was right, and deep within her a small flame sparked, whispering that it was time to face the challenge, not for him but for herself. She smiled faintly, her voice soft but firm. "All right, I'll try." Jordan nodded, his eyes gleaming like moonlight in the dark, and both knew that from this moment, the path ahead would no longer be simple. The days that followed flowed like a river, both calm and turbulent beneath the surface, and Olivia Marie Smith began to realize that Jordan Wesley Brooks wasn't joking about his promise. She was invited to critical meetings where expensive suits and sharp gazes reigned, where every word carried the weight of gold. Jordan frequently sought her input, his warm, resonant voice cutting through the room like a bronze bell, and gradually, the way her colleagues viewed her shifted. No longer the quiet little assistant in the corner, but someone valued by CEO Jordan Wesley Brooks himself, a rough gem he was polishing to shine. It didn't escape anyone's notice, and whispers spread through the hallways like wind rustling leaves. Friday arrived and Olivia was hunched over a report, her fingers dancing across the keyboard like an artist's performance. Her phone buzzed and a message from Jordan appeared. Brief but enough to make her heart skip a beat. "Dinner tonight?" She raised an eyebrow, her fingers hovering over the screen like a bird perched on a branch. This wasn't a summons like before. He was genuinely asking. But Olivia knew that if she said yes, she'd cross an invisible line. Fragile as spider silk yet sharp as a blade. She typed quickly, "Can't tonight," and hit send before she could overthink it. His reply came like lightning. "Understood. But one day you'll say yes." Olivia sighed, the sound heavy like falling autumn leaves because deep down, she knew he was right. The question wasn't if, but when. And what would happen when that day came? She thought refusing the invitation would untangle the mess of emotions in her chest, but she was gravely mistaken. Instead of bringing clarity, it only fanned Jordan's attention like a flame catching the wind, and worse, she began to feel her own heart tilting toward him, like a sail unable to resist the waves. In the days that followed, Olivia's routine shifted. More meetings, bigger challenges, and increasingly frequent encounters with Jordan. She loved what she was learning, like a gardener enthralled by each new sprout, but she hated admitting that a dangerous game was unfolding between her and Jordan. A wordless duet they both heard clearly, though neither dared to sing aloud. On Wednesday afternoon, Olivia stood at the company cafe, holding a paper cup, her gaze drifting absently over the passing crowd. A warm breath brushed her ear. Black coffee, no sugar. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Jordan's low voice rumbled like waves on a shore. She smiled, her lips curving like a crescent moon. "If I switched to a latte, would you lose your mind?" Jordan raised an eyebrow, his eyes glinting like an oil lamp. "No, but I'd be disappointed." She laughed, the sound crisp as wind chimes, then joined him to grab coffee and sit at a quiet table. For a moment they seemed like two ordinary people. No ranks, no pressure. But then Jordan broke the stillness, his voice sharp as a knife. "Why did you turn down dinner that night?" Olivia blinked, startled as if a stone had been tossed into a calm lake. "Because it's a terrible idea," she replied, trying to keep her tone steady. He tilted his head, his probing gaze like a hunter sizing up prey. "Why's that?" She crossed her arms, raising a fragile shield. "Because you're my boss." Jordan gave a faint smile, a breeze passing through a porch. "That's never been an issue before." Her face flushed, a small flame flaring beneath ashes. "Don't make it weird, Mr. Jordan." "I'm not the one making it weird," he said, his tone deadpan but his eyes twinkling with mischief. Olivia sighed, the sound heavy like the last leaf falling from a branch. "Jordan, we both know this can't happen." He fell silent for a moment, his gaze deep as a well, then asked, "And if I wanted to?" Her heart pounded like drums in a dense forest. He was being direct, no sidestepping, no subtext, and she didn't know what to do but deflect. She forced a small smile, her voice soft as a breeze. "Then that's your problem." She stood and walked away before he could say more, her feet moving quickly as if fleeing an approaching storm. That night, Olivia tossed and turned in bed, her wide eyes searching the ceiling for answers in the dark. Jordan wasn't the type to give up easily. He was a steadfast mountain, and she, though strong, was just a small bird swaying in the wind. For the first time she wondered if she even wanted to resist. The answer lay quietly in her heart, clear as moonlight in the dark, but admitting it was another matter, like opening a door she feared she couldn't close. In the days that followed, things shifted, though no one spoke it aloud. Jordan didn't push, but he didn't retreat either. He was there, silently watching, patient as a fisherman waiting for a bite. Olivia knew she'd have to face the truth eventually. She just didn't know when. Friday morning, Olivia sat at her desk, trying to focus on a report Jordan had requested. But every 5 minutes, her mind drifted to him. The way he looked at her, his gaze deep as the ocean. The way he waited patiently, like an oil lamp that never flickered out. She sighed, shaking her head to dispel the cloud of emotions, but then her phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. "My office now." She rolled her eyes, but her heart dropped like a stone off a cliff. She grabbed her notebook, stood, and tried to maintain composure, though she knew this conversation wouldn't be normal. When she stepped in, she immediately sensed something different. Jordan wasn't seated behind his desk as usual. He stood by the window, the morning light casting a glow on his steady silhouette, his eyes gazing out at the city like a king surveying his realm. She closed the door softly, her voice professional but tinged with a tremor. "Do you need something, Mr. Jordan?" He turned, his gaze locking onto her, deep and intense like a smoldering fire. He remained silent for a long moment, then asked bluntly without hesitation, "How long are you going to pretend you don't feel what I feel?" Olivia's heart stopped for a second, like a bird shot mid-flight in a clear sky. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. She swallowed hard, crossing her arms like a fragile shield. "And what do you think I feel?" Jordan smiled faintly, a smile like moonlight through clouds, gentle yet challenging. "I think you feel the same as I do." Olivia looked away, trying to suppress the wave of emotions rising like a roaring sea. "This can't happen, Jordan." He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking like a taut thread about to snap. "Why not?" "Because you're my boss," she replied, her voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. "And it's wrong." He raised an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. "Wrong for whom? For others or for you?" Olivia fell silent, not because she lacked reasons, but because her heart was at war with itself. Jordan took another step, his warmth radiating like a winter hearth. "Give me one real reason why this shouldn't happen." She took a deep breath, her voice soft as a breeze. "Because everything will go wrong." He tilted his head, his eyes glinting like an oil lamp. "And what if it goes right?" She held her breath, for the first time considering that possibility. A new door, both terrifying and alluring, like dawn after a long night. The air between them grew heavy, laden with unspoken things, like the sky before a storm. Olivia felt the heat of his gaze, a blend of patience and longing like a hunter awaiting prey. She wanted to surrender, but before she could act, Jordan's phone rang, slicing through the moment like a sharp blade. He glanced at the screen, sighing as if pulled from a dream. "I have to take this." Olivia nodded quickly, seizing the chance like a drowning person grasping a lifeline. "I'll go," she said, stepping out of the room, her mind a tangled mess. She needed air, needed distance, but deep down she knew the line between them had blurred, and the day she'd say yes might not be far off. In the days that followed, Olivia Marie Smith transformed into a master of evasion, dodging Jordan Wesley Brooks like a small bird avoiding an owl's gaze. It wasn't because she was angry with him, no, anger wasn't the issue. It was because she knew, deep within her like an unseen underground river, that if she stood too close to him for too long, she wouldn't be able to resist his pull, like an oil lamp drawing moths into a fiery spiral. But she wasn't ready to face it, not ready to open a door she feared she couldn't close. Jordan, on the other hand, showed no sign of letting things drift by like clouds lazily crossing the sky. On Tuesday afternoon, as the sunset painted her desk in gold, her phone buzzed. A message from him. "Dinner tonight?" No special reason. Olivia bit her lip, her fingers hovering over the screen like a butterfly hesitating before the wind. She knew that if she agreed, there'd be no turning back, like a boat leaving the dock, destined to move forward or sink. Before she could change her mind, he added, "Just dinner. I promise." The promise was light as a breeze, but enough to make her take a deep breath, like someone about to leap off a cliff without a safety line. "All right," she typed quickly, her heart pounding like drums in a deep forest. The dinner unfolded with surprising ease, like a cool stream flowing through a summer field. They talked about work, funny office stories, and Borner Market, where she still stopped every afternoon. For a moment, Olivia let herself forget the weight of their situation, like a weary traveler finding shade in a desert. But as they left the restaurant, the streetlights casting faint streaks across Jordan's face, the inevitable happened, like a storm breaking after a long sunny day. Jordan grabbed her arm before she could step into the taxi, his hand warm but firm, like an anchor holding a ship steady in rough waves. "Olivia," he called, his voice low and fierce like distant thunder. She turned, her eyes wide with surprise like a lost deer. Her heart raced, beating against her chest like a caged bird. And before she could think, Jordan leaned in, his lips meeting hers in an unexpected kiss. It wasn't logical or planned. It was a flame bursting from smoldering ashes, carrying desire, tension, and something deeper that Olivia didn't dare name. When they parted, Jordan looked into her eyes, a gentle smile breaking through like moonlight piercing clouds. "Is this still a mistake to you?" Olivia stood there, her mind spinning like a whirlwind, unsure how to respond. Because in that moment the only thing she could think of was wanting to kiss him again. A dangerous thought, like playing with fire in the dead of night. She couldn't stop replaying that kiss. It was irrational, wrong, like a discordant note in a symphony, but she couldn't wish it undone. Since meeting Jordan Wesley Brooks, her life had veered off course, like a star falling from the sky, and now pretending nothing had happened was impossible. The question hung over her like a looming cloud. What was she going to do with all of this? The next morning, Olivia woke with tired eyes, like someone who'd run through a dusty, windswept field. The night before had been a mess, tangled thoughts, the memory of the kiss clinging like a lingering scent, and a deep unease about what it all meant. She tried to reason. Jordan was her boss. This could complicate everything, like tossing a stone into a still lake. But no matter how many times she repeated those arguments in her mind like a prayer, she knew it was too late. Her heart, like a sail powerless against the wind, wanted more. And that was the biggest problem. A mountain blocking the path she'd once thought was smooth. At the office, the air felt different. Not as clear as sunlight, but hazy like morning mist. Olivia sensed Jordan's gaze whenever he passed her desk, not burning but gentle and patient, like an oil lamp waiting to be lit. He didn't mention the kiss, but he didn't avoid her either, as if leaving the next move up to her. The longer she delayed, the more she realized she couldn't keep dodging forever. Friday arrived, and as the workday wound down, Olivia was packing up, a pen dropping onto her desk like the final punctuation of the day. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. "Penthouse, 8 p.m. Her heart pounded like war drums, a mix of fear and excitement surging within her. She knew that if she went, all uncertainty would dissolve. No room left for hesitation, only the raw truth as stark as a full moon. She took a deep breath, deciding not to run anymore, like a warrior choosing to face the enemy rather than turn away. When she arrived at the penthouse, Jordan stood by the balcony, his steady silhouette framed against the city's glittering lights like a mountain overlooking its domain. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his eyes lighting up like a smoldering flame. "I thought you wouldn't come." Olivia gave a faint smile, fleeting as a breeze through a porch. "I thought about not coming." He raised an eyebrow, his voice warm and low like waves on a shore. "So why are you here?" She fell silent, her hands gripping the edge of her jacket as if clinging to the last scraps of reason, then took a deep breath and spoke the truth. "Because I don't want to keep running from this." Jordan looked at her for a long moment, his gaze deep as a well, then without a word, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them like a taut thread about to snap. He kissed her again, no doubt, no pretext. A kiss as real as sunlight after rain, as powerful as wind sweeping through a field. Olivia didn't resist, didn't want to. She let herself sink into the moment, like a boat drifting with the current. When they parted, their breaths mingling like morning mist, a question lingered in the air, heavy as the sky before a storm. What happens next? In the days that followed, Olivia and Jordan continued meeting outside the office, quiet evenings over wine or walks under streetlights, where they were no longer boss and employee, but two people drawn together like wayward stars. At the company, though, they maintained perfect professionalism, a picture painted with precise strokes. Still, the perceptive began to notice, a glance lingering too long, a smile flitting by like wind through grass. Olivia knew it wouldn't be long before someone asked questions, like a towering wave about to crash ashore. She wasn't afraid, but a flicker of unease stirred within her, like a sailor glimpsing the horizon, both eager and anxious about what lay ahead. Monday arrived like a gust of wind sweeping through a field, bringing a tense atmosphere that Olivia Marie Smith couldn't ignore. When Jordan Wesley Brooks called her into his office, she stepped in, closing the door with a soft click like punctuation, then crossed her arms, her gaze sharp as a small blade. "Is this about work or about us?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion, like a sailor gauging waves before the open sea. Jordan smiled, a small but warm smile like sunlight sneaking through clouds. "This time it's about us." Olivia swallowed hard, her throat dry as a desert under a blazing sun. "About what?" He looked at her. his eyes serious as a mountain standing firm in a storm. This can't stay a secret forever. Her stomach tightened like a taut rope, a vague fear surging within her. You want to go public? Jordan shrugged, his demeanor casual, like someone tossing a stone into a lake without caring about the ripples. I don't want to hide. I don't need to hide. Olivia fell silent, her hands gripping tighter as if clinging to the last scraps of reason. Then she took a deep breath, like someone preparing to leap off a cliff, and nodded. Deep down she knew this day would come, like dawn inevitably following a long night. The thought of hiding her relationship with Jordan scared her more than she dared admit. Not out of shame, but because it felt like keeping a flame in a glass cage, both warm and suffocating. Lately things between them had been strangely simple, at least as simple as a relationship with Jordan Wesley Brooks could be. Outside of work, they met every night, evenings with glasses of red wine. Conversation stretching from work to trivial things like a colleague's laugh or the smell of morning coffee. They laughed together, sat in silence together, and the most surprising part was that Olivia was starting to love it, like a gardener enchanted by each new sprout, though she knew she shouldn't. But the next morning as she stepped into 4 Barrel, the air felt different, like the sky before a storm, heavy and foreboding. People looked at her strangely, some whispering like wind through leaves, others staring as if she were a mysterious painting. She frowned, a flicker of confusion stirring within her, like someone lost in a deep forest. Then she saw it, on a nearby computer screen. An article blazed like a fire in the night. 4 Barrel CEO spotted dining intimately with employee. Olivia held her breath, her heart pounding like war drums. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the photo of her and Jordan leaving the restaurant last week, streetlights casting light on their faces, was as clear as a full moon. Her face burned as if licked by flames, and she hurried to her desk, her trembling hands grabbing her phone. A message from Jordan was already waiting. My office. Now. When she stepped in, closing the door with a sharp click, Jordan sat on the edge of his desk, phone in hand, his demeanor calm as a mountain amid crashing waves. So it's out in the open sooner than we expected, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm, like someone who just lost a chess match. He looked up, his eyes showing no surprise. Someone saw us at the restaurant. Olivia huffed, as if she'd just run through a dusty field. And now what? Jordan shrugged, his voice steady as waves on a shore. Now we move forward. She raised an eyebrow, surprised as if hearing a riddle. That's it? You don't care. He looked straight into her eyes, his gaze deep as a well. Do you care? Olivia opened her mouth, but the words caught like a bird in a cage. She didn't know the answer, didn't know how she should feel in this whirlwind. In the days that followed, rumors spread like wildfire through the office, the flames of gossip licking every corner of the hallways. People whispered all sorts of things. Some said Olivia was climbing the career ladder through a shortcut, like a bird riding the wind. Others sneered that she was just Jordan's new toy. Each new rumor was a small dagger piercing her heart, making her feel trapped in a glass cage. But Jordan was different. Steady as a rock in a rushing stream, unbothered by the murmurs, like a sailor accustomed to big waves who doesn't fear the wind's howl. It both awed and frustrated her because for her this wasn't a game. This was her career, her life, now turned into a cheap drama on tabloid pages. Friday came, and after a long heavy day that felt like carrying a storm-laden sky on her shoulders, Olivia packed up, her hands moving slowly like someone emerging from battle. Jordan appeared by her desk, his presence calm as an oil lamp in the dark. Let's go. She frowned, startled as if hearing thunder. Go where? Somewhere no one will bother us, he replied, his voice warm and low like waves on a shore. She hesitated, her fingers gripping her bag strap as if clinging to reason, but then realized she needed to escape this mess, like a bird craving the open sky. They went to a small quiet restaurant, a hidden corner of the world far from prying eyes. For the first time in days, Olivia took a deep breath, the relief like shedding heavy armor. Jordan noticed immediately, his gaze soft as moonlight. Rough day. She gave a faint dry laugh like falling leaves. One of the worst. He looked at her, his eyes deep as the ocean. I can fix this. Olivia shook her head, her voice firm as a rock. No. If I don't handle it myself, I'm not strong enough to be here. He smiled faintly, a breeze through a porch. That's what I like most about you. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, like a bird faltering mid-flight. Before she could reply, he reached across the table, taking her hand, his touch warm as a winter hearth. We'll get through this, he said, his voice solid as a driven nail. In that moment, Olivia wanted to believe him. Despite all the chaos, she didn't want to give up. Not on this, not on him. She'd never imagined her life veering down this path when she started at 4 Barrel. All she'd wanted was stability, like a river flowing quietly. Now her life spilled across gossip pages, whispers in hallways, curious stares like invisible arrows. But there was also Jordan, the man who made all the chaos meaningful, a lamp lighting her way through the dark. The following Monday, Olivia stepped into the office with renewed resolve, like a warrior donning armor for battle. She wouldn't hide, wouldn't let anyone define her story. Surprisingly, as the day wore on, the gossip began to fade, like clouds dispersing after rain. People quickly tired of the scandal, eager for the next drama. But for Olivia, the real challenge still lay ahead. Lately, she'd noticed something different about Jordan. The way he looked at her, his gaze deep as an ocean. The brief pauses before he spoke, like a fisherman waiting for the perfect moment. Deep down, she sensed a monumental moment approaching, like dawn silently drawing near. Friday evening, Jordan invited her to a special dinner. The small private restaurant had a table adorned with candles and flowers, the air warm as a winter hearth. As he took her hand, Olivia knew something was coming, like a breeze heralding a storm. He looked into her eyes, took a deep breath, his voice low as waves. Olivia, I've never been good at showing emotions. She smiled faintly, her tone teasing. I've noticed. He chuckled softly, but his eyes grew serious. But you've changed me. I thought my life was complete, company, success, everything. Then you came along, and I realized I was missing something vital. Olivia felt her eyes sting, like standing before a fire that was both warm and searing. He knelt, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, a ring sparkled under the candlelight like a star fallen in the dark. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said, his voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. Someone who challenges me, makes me laugh, makes me want to be better. You taught me that life isn't just about success, but about the people beside you to share it with. Tears rolled down Olivia's cheeks, but she couldn't stop smiling, like sunlight breaking through rain. Olivia Marie Smith, will you be my wife? Her heart burst, like a bird escaping its cage into the open sky. Yes, she cried, her voice choked but firm as a rock in a river. Jordan slipped the ring onto her finger, standing to pull her into a passionate kiss, a promise etched into time. Months later, the wedding day arrived, and Olivia stood before a mirror in a pristine white gown, her eyes shining like precious gems. As the church doors opened, she saw Jordan at the altar, perfect in a black tuxedo, his gaze fierce yet tender, a privilege only she truly understood. Walking down the aisle, everything faded, leaving just him and her, like 2 stars finding each other in a vast sky. Their vows rang out, Jordan said. You've turned my life upside down in the most perfect way, and Olivia replied, I promise to love you, stubbornness and terrible jokes included. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Jordan pulled her into a kiss, applause rising like a summer rain. In that moment, they knew this was just the first page of a long story they'd write together, forever. What do you think of Olivia and Jordan's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you rate this story on a scale of 0 to 10? Subscribe and turn on notifications to follow all the stories, and don't forget to check out more touching tales by clicking here on the final screen.